budget. We'll call the meeting to order. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. Tim?
Tim DeSorsi, Finance Director.
Shane Blazer, Mayor.
Jay Bemke, District 8.
Dennis Pollock, number 6.
Jay Catnaw, District 5.
Tom Rome, District 4.
Matt Zacher, District 3.
Right.
Brian Austin, District 1.
Thank you. We'll call the meeting to order then, and item 1, and basically the only item on the budget, or on the agenda tonight, is the discussion and utilization of ARPA and FEMA funds. I'm going to go with Tim. You want to get us started?
Sure. As you're aware, we, a couple of years ago, we got a ARPA grant fund from the federal government for $1,843,213. So far, what we've expended from those ARPA funds was the 2022 water main construction, which utilized $513,162 from those funds. Current ARPA funds that we've committed at this point was for the Centralia Center roof project. Committed dollars there, and that work will be done in 2024 is $489,202.
Can you read that number again?
$489,202. That leaves us a total unexpended, uncommitted ARPA grant funds of $840,849. I've invested those. When we got the grant funds, I invested those at our local government investment pool. So between the receipt of the funds and today, we've earned about $77,675 in interest. So it leaves us ARPA grant funds available of $918,523. Now, these funds can be used for, since they're considered revenue loss back with the COVID, we were able to take advantage of a one-time election to use, to designate it as lost revenue. So that means that we can use it for any governmental service or purpose. Anything under $10 million, you're allowed that election. Otherwise, anything over $10 million, they had specific categories that you had to spend it on. But since we took that election, we basically have, a lot more flexibility in what we use it for. The grant funds must be expended or committed by the end of December 31st, 2024. If we commit on a contract before December 2024, they have to be expended by December 31st, 2026. And the other funds we'll be discussing is back in 2019 when we had the windstorm, we were able to apply for a FEMA grant, and through a lot of working with FEMA and things, we finally received payment for those expenses that we incurred of $443,393. So we have those funds available to obviously use for whatever we see fit. So we're here to discuss kind of how we may want to utilize those funds, especially the ARPA ones, since they do have a timeline on it. And it would be nice to get those funds expended by the end of 2024, and then we can close out our reporting with the federal government and things like that. So that's what we're here to discuss.
So there's no timeline on FEMA?
Nope.
Jake?
So back in early 2022, we met on similar terms regarding the ARPA funding. I think we were then requested to all just kind of send our ideas over on where we could spend that. So I just forwarded an email I sent to you guys back in on February 16, 2022. But at that time, we were dealing with special assessment revenue. So that was one. I had general road construction, small business startup grants. We had some vacancies or needs in departments. So I said paid intern program for departments if we need extra help, staff training, emergency vehicle replacement, East River Plaza project, city garage improvements, additional staff and engineering because we were backed up. I don't know what the status is on that. And then grants for rehabilitation of commercial properties. I don't know how many of those are still viable and qualify, but I just figured we'd start up for discussion on it because I'm guessing that's what we're looking at is like, what do we want to do with it, right? or do you have an idea?
No, that's correct. And I know that one of the main things was, kind of invest in our roads was one of the main things that we wanted to do. And I know that, been kind of discussing utilizing those funds for the reconstruction of East Jackson from A Street to the bridge. Is that correct? So that was one of the projects. The problem with that is between getting it designed and things like that, that it probably would not be a project ready to let in 2024. But there are some options there that, we obviously have road construction each year. So it could be that we utilize those ARPA funds for our 2024 projects. And then the funding that we would have used in next year's budgets for those projects, we could then use for the East Jackson. So, overall, it would equal out as far as the utilization of those funds.
So we would essentially, what we put into the roads for a year, use ARPA funding, and then that money would go into like a capital improvement for the roads fund
Well,
until we use next year, so we get a year off of bonding for roads, or?
Right, yeah, that would be kind of the,
Okay.
because, obviously on an annual basis, we issue long-term debt for our road construction
Right.
projects. So assuming that would be the same course for 2024, and I know that'll be a discussion, later, in a subsequent, maybe the whole meeting, how we want to fund that. I'm laying out the options of kind of where we're at with the budget and where the levy is and different funding sources to balance the budget. But yeah, assuming that if we'd issue debt for the projects in the 2024 budget, we'd use ARPA funds, and obviously that would significantly reduce that debt issue. And then when we got to East Jackson, obviously then we'd most likely have to then issue long-term debt. But the net would be the, net reduction in debt between those two subsequent years would be the $918,000 that we have in ARPA if we choose to use the full amount for that purpose.
So we can take a year off of taking debt and run essentially on just the tax levy.
Or reduce it. Right now, our public works construction is about, it's about 1.8 million for what they have planned for next year, but obviously that would significantly reduce that.
Excellent.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, previously I remember Mr. Austin speaking when we had discussed this about putting into the roads. I know, and I'll bring it up for consideration, is that there is a building need at the street department. There's a lot of equipment and items sitting outside. And then Paul had submitted a request for just under $500,000 to build a large pole shed. And a lot of items could be housed inside. But obviously roads are a priority too. So, if there's not a strong desire for that, I'd fully support, it all going into the roads. But I'm going to call Tim out or highlight. I know he's not going to like it, but back in 2019, previous employees submitted to FEMA. They did the work. They submitted all online, and I can't remember the amount at that point, but Tim saw that there was a lot of items missed, and so he's literally spent almost the last 4 years working with FEMA to reopen, to get all those items that were missed, which came to $228,000. So in that FEMA check, there's $228,000. In the last 4 years, Tim has spent a lot of time and a lot of meetings and a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zoom and a lot of accumulating of information that had been missed. So there's that extra $228,000. I appreciate it, Tim, for the work, because I know you spent a lot of time and a lot of headaches trying to get FEMA to recognize those expenses that should have been recognized the first time around. Thank you.
So, that FEMA number of 489,202, right? Oh, yeah, 489,202 was the Central Ag, right below it, yeah. Yeah, 443, the FEMA number, sounds just a little shy of the pole shed.
Correct. But I guess I'm trying to figure out where the greatest priority is. Because obviously Jackson Street does not have a lot of infrastructure, so it will be mainly through the taxpayers that will pay for that street and that road work. We won't have any of the utilities participating in that project very much. So that's going to be a big expense.
Jake?
We know we've been facing an issue with the city garage for a number of years, and you can probably speak to this, or Jay, better than I can, but with the size of what it is, the size that equipment's changed, how everything fits in there, the age of the building, if we were able to give them the requested storage shed for 400,000 or whatever you said, how long does it put out that we may not need to address that issue? Because it is an issue, so.
I think it's going to have to be dealt with at some point, but, ideally, parts of that building that they use on a daily basis are from 1940.
Right.
And so they're still utilizing, which more power to them. But at some point, as equipment gets bigger, like you said, it is really tight in there, that, there's going to have to be a commitment over there to do something. And years ago, it's been a number of years, there was an $18 million price tag on a new street department. And that's not getting any cheaper. But there is expensive equipment and inventory and those type of things that are sitting outside.
Right,
And-
that's my concern. So I guess if we grant funds towards the shed, does it alleviate the problem at the city garage, or are we still down the road gonna have to build a new street department city garage? Because it wouldn't make sense to put 400 towards it now and then go build a new one completely.
I believe that in conversations with Paul is that even if they built a new shed, a new street department at some point, which is probably going to be after we're long gone, by the time we're able to borrow that kind of money, that shed would still be utilized as part of, the existing campus at that time. So it wouldn't be for naught. They would still utilize that.
How
But-
much money is the equipment worth that's sitting outside? Does anybody know, or just a guesstimate?
I don't know.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Yeah, it's an investment.
I think Paul said that, just kind of threw a number out there, but the cost of equipment's gone up 40% in the last handful of years. So when you're talking, Tim, do you remember what the garbage truck was, just off the top of your head? Quarter of a
It's
million?
like 400, yeah, it was 400,000.
And it's an older garbage truck, but they've got one of those sitting out back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is we need to split it. I wouldn't leave anything personally that valuable outside. I mean, we're speaking on it in a public setting as well, so people know it's out there if they didn't already. But I wouldn't leave anything of my own outside like that, and we are doing that at the point because we don't have the storage for it. So I see a necessity for that, and then I think there's money for the other side for the roads, but I think we could split it up. Is that possible? I mean, you should be able to work that out, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we can pretty much obviously for the garage portion, I don't know when the timing of that would occur, but, the FEMA is separate from the ARPA as far as an accounting and source of funds. So the FEMA
But the ARPA has to be spent by,
has to be spent or obligated by the end of next year. So,
well, I think we need to address both, so I would say that we take up both. I don't know why we wouldn't do the shed. I mean, that's concerning to me. It's not, I'm a taxpayer, so it's all part of all our property, but we're leaving it outside, and something that happens to that property that's out there, then we come back and we got to bill for it and we got to pay for it. So I think they're both equal in need. In either way, I mean, there's going to be some type of taxpayer money along the way going to either one. So I'm in favor of the shed, and then the rest for the roads. That's where I'm at.
Tom, you had your hand up before.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that the shed is an important one for us, to discuss and decide at some point, if we should do that now. Personally, I think we should, but I think, we should get the plans and whatever, design and what actually it's gonna cost. And I think, as far as money for the street projects and that, I guess being talked about is offsetting what would be borrowed this year. Hopefully, I guess if that's the route that is gone, is that as the ARPA money and that disappears, that the following year that those street projects will continue, and that there'll still be that need to look into how to fund those projects. So where it sounds good, I'm somewhat leery of using that as a stopgap measure of progressing along with our streets in need of repair, where it could be used for that, but I'm hesitant in that we take all the money away from if we need to borrow for anything to continue in the budget as in the past. Now, I'm not saying the entire amount, but if there'd be the possibility of doing more than we normally would to use that ARPA money for, and that we'd still borrow the money, whatever, to do further projects, if it can put into the schedule, if it could be. That's just a thought that goes through my mind, is do we have a chance to catch up, not catch up all the way, but to catch up on some that we're behind, if I'm making sense here of what I'm trying to say anyway. So I guess for me, that's just some food for thought of how it possibly could be used. I guess if anybody else has thoughts on what to use, you jump in tonight or in the future, because but I would like to see us take care of at some point in time soon to that we designate how that money's going to be spent. You said by the end of the year, or 2024, Tim, to have the plans for it, and that I think we should. I'm not saying tonight, but that we should keep moving along on this. But I just wonder if there ain't a way we can use that ARPA money with the shed, but also to combine into street work, but to see how far that takes us, that if we could add into the street by borrowing some money. So,
Your Honor?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The only issue is our street department does as much work as they can in a year, so they would have to actually contract that out and have contractors do that work, which obviously is going to be probably a little more expensive, I would think. But yeah, I just
I was just looking at if the schedule,
yeah.
if there's room in the schedule to put more in.
Yeah, I think they pretty much, they actually, I think, overplan a little bit. So then if there's time, they can do a project, or they leave it on a shelf for it's all designed and ready to go for the next year. Or if they get some flexibility in the room with the weather and things like that, there's usually hopefully something that they can pull off and get another step further. But I think Tim's hoping that we get some kind of guidance tonight, because we are putting the budget together, and how these funds need to be utilized, because it's all part of the budget process of completing the budget.
Tim?
To address your concern, Tom, is that one of the reasons why we kind of considered the Jackson Street project is because there's not a lot of utility work there, and that's where mainly our crews are utilized, is in the utilities. So most of that project is going to be contract with the asphalt, with the pavement contract and things like that. So that's why we thought it was an appropriate use of ARPA funds. So technically, if we used ARPA to offset the cost of the 2024 projects, and say Jackson's ready to go in 2025, we'd probably do our normal regular street construction projects, and then Jackson would be an additional project on top of that. And that's why we consider the Jackson Street project. So it's kind of a project in addition to what we normally do each year.
Ryan?
Is there a time limit on expending the FEMA funds?
No.
I'm just thinking, does it make sense to maybe try to go after some pricing for the city shed and potentially use ARPA on that and use the FEMA for Jackson?
Yeah, it's just, yeah, if we could get the specs out on it and done in time, I'm just concerned that we get it expended. I mean, either way, if you use ARPA for the shed or FEMA, overall, it's going to be the same. We can take the FEMA money and earmark that for the shed and spend it next year, the year after that, or whatever. We'll just put it in a designated building improvement fund and save that, and then, but overall, whether you use ARPA or FEMA for this or that, it's all going to, even out in the end when you do that. So it's just that ARPA has more of the time limit where FEMA doesn't. So if we could get that, design spec'd out and obligated before the end of next year, yes, we could use ARPA for that.
I'm just thinking if it's a basic pole shed, there shouldn't be a whole lot of design involved. It should be a pretty quick process.
So, go ahead, Jay.
So I'm 99% sure Paul has an estimate, and it's probably at least a year old, so you're going to see some increases in it. But he's got a pretty good idea on size and ballpark on cost. I think the other thing is this Jackson Street project will tie in this project to our Lincoln Street project, and I mean that has the potential to be a pretty nice project as it's finished. So I think I can support this. My only concern is when we borrow. So this year we'd probably be looking at borrowing what, less than $1 million for our street projects, correct? Mm-hmm. And then what would we do next year?
One year you have a lower bond, no issue, the next year you would have a higher one, but the net would be $918,000 reduction.
Do you have any idea off the top of your head what we would save on interest? No, that's fine. But there's going to be a savings, correct? Pretty substantial.
ARPA invested, assuming that we would issue debt for the project next year, the reduction that not only have the 19 would have to save the interest in that.
Very good. Thank you.
Jake?
So I don't really like the idea of earmarking funds and moving them down the road to do the city shed. I think when you do things like that, it cancels out the increased costs, which we just talked about, are going to occur from year to year. It is going to occur on the shed as we earmark it and hold it out longer, and probably cost more than the interest, depending on how much those things go up. I would really like to see both these things move forward and us just get stuff done. And I would like to make the appropriate motion for that, which is a motion to utilize the ARPA funds for the shed at the city garage and the remaining ARPA and FEMA funds towards the road projects that have been identified.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, earmarking the funds doesn't preclude us for when we want to do it. I mean, if we earmark the FEMA funds or ARPA for the shed, that doesn't stop us from doing it as soon as we can get it done. So it's just, now we're just designating what what intended purpose we're going to use them for.
Yeah, I'm just making a motion to move it forward and get all the projects going as soon as possible.
Would you be receptive of amending your motion, just instead of like identifying what source of money for each, that the FEMA and ARPA funds go towards the city garage, and then the remaining funds used for road construction. So that way, from an accounting standpoint, because the ARPA funds, we get single audit on. So I just want to look for the easiest way to do that, because that can
Certainly,
get complicated.
yeah.
But obviously, the first priority would be the garage and whatever that comes back at, and the remaining amount would be used for the road construction projects in 2024.
Yeah, certainly. I don't want to cause any troubles for you. So, motion amended, would you like me to reread it, or can that stand on record as it's amended as such? Okay, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
I have a question.
Tim, are you taking notes? I wasn't taking the notes, so. Pardon? Okay. Jay?
I guess my only question is, and I think maybe this amendment just answered it, but we've got $443,000 in FEMA. What happens if this building comes in at $600,000? Are we gonna?
Pulling it, well, the way I understand it, be pulled from ARPA.
So we're gonna take money out of that street project?
If the way I understood Alderperson's Catnaw is that I think his first priority was city garage, and the rest go towards streets, correct?
Well, we're doing the streets either way.
Right.
So, the garage was the one that was brought up today. So, I don't see we're allotting funds tonight, right? Not approving projects. So I think my motion would stand as such, and as the projects come, they'll still have to be approved.
Yeah, I was just going to, I agree with you, is that we'll have Paul get an updated bid, so then we'll kind of have a rough number to put into the budget. It's still got to be let out for bid, and so you still have that option to decide at that point, nah, it's more than what we want to spend, let's put that money towards the roads. So you still have options at that point. You're not committed 100% to having to do that.
I'm okay with that. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do you know at all, do we stay in touch with Ellers at all in terms of what the rates are going to be looking like this year when our favorite conversation comes around again?
If it comes around, right?
Yeah, right.
Actually, rates have been kind of, exempt municipal debt, geo debt has been fairly stable. I haven't looked at it lately, but obviously, by the time, when we normally issue debt is usually in the April to June timeframe, so obviously interest rates can dramatically change between now and then. So I thought the last debt, issue that we did, we got, favorable rates on it considering what the interest rate environment was. So, the tax exempt market is, a lot has to do with supply and demand, with, how much, how much the brokers out there, how much demand they have for people wanting to invest in general obligation notes and bonds. So it can fluctuate just based on that too.
I'm still talking. Okay.
So I asked him this last time he was here, and the projections were that not much would change, was his answer, essentially.
All right, thanks. So I'm in favor of the building. I think if you look long-term, it's going to save us, has the potential to save us money on having our equipment last longer. I mean, we watch our stuff rust away all the time, so hopefully they can keep it under cover and also, have a place to be able to clean it in the winter and get the salt off of it, I think would be a huge benefit. Any money that is left over, I would highly support putting it towards the debt or new debt of the new road projects. And if we can, whatever we can put towards that and knock it down, possibly even 100% if we find money from other places, even 1 year of not taking out debt or very little debt would help our debt situation, our full debt situation out quite a bit. I think that would be great for our health of the city finances. Thank you.
Let's vote.
Well, it would seem, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I I guess my understanding would be more of of what we're looking at tonight is giving direction to, and I think coming up with, if that's the route we're looking at, of getting updated estimates on the garage. I guess these are what we're looking at, the total amount of money written down, FEMA, ARP, and ARPA, and the cost of what we're looking at. I don't know that we're really looking at a motion per se to lock into anything, but to me, it's to give direction on the route we want to go. As we go through the budget process. This all gets tied in together, of where we're at, so, I'm okay with, putting numbers on paper there of what's gonna be updating, plans and that, what the cost would be, because it wasn't, I think, the 400 and some thousand before, and what it is now, I don't know, so it's where we'd be, but, it's all, that would, if that's the route we go, if it's gone up 150,000 or something, that's where I think we're, if that's top on our list, that we're gonna commit to add that to 150,000 and do the project. So that's why I'd just like to see the updated figures and what there are, we can put, and then put where we are, but I think to give Tim direction on where to put these numbers towards, but we need an updated estimate on a building plan.
It would seem that, but the motion's still without a second.
No, Ryan seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. Go ahead then.
I was just going I agree, Tom, and we'll ask Paul to get an updated estimate too for that. But he'll be able to then kind of lay it out in the budget, and that estimate then will be included in there of kind of the rough amount in that budget line item. And then you can decide once we kind of get, even when we get to his budget, because hopefully we'll have the estimate by then, and maybe at that time you'll decide that it is enough of a priority no matter what the cost is, or if it's maybe cost prohibitive at this time, then maybe you might have another option, but we can get that update for you by then, hopefully.
So the motion was to use, you want to repeat it then, Jake?
Sure.
Because we do have a second and no vote, so.
With the amendment to the motion, it would stand as the motion is to use FEMA and ARPA funds for an additional storage shed at the city garage and the remainder towards our planned road construction projects. I
And
didn't
that was
write
second.
that down.
Yeah, and the way that motion sits is fine, correct, Tim? I just wanted to confirm that, and then we got a second by Ryan. So any further discussion?
I would just like to add that with this motion and whatever happens with this vote, that this is not as though we're putting a city garage over the roads. It's just an allotment of funds that the projects are coming and everything needs to be done. So we're not approving any projects yet, and the city road construction projects are already planned. So they're just two necessities that are the funding's being allotted for us to continue to move forward in the budget process and know where it's going. It's not a priority of one or the other.
Matt?
Was there anything, we kind of directed ourselves into this motion that we have, and I'm not against it. Is there anything that's out there that we're not talking about that is pressing? Or everything else is kind of sitting tight for now? No.
I think every department head probably could give you an idea.
Well,
Something pressing.
Yeah, we're not talking about that.
Right.
We're talking about pressing stuff, that we're not
Yeah.
disregarding something that should be talked about here.
I think the council's done a good job, allocating funds for Centralia roof, because that's obviously a very big priority. And, you know, also replacing the rooftop units that you guys have approved. And, you know, those are things that would eventually cost taxpayer dollars if we'd have to bond for that or include it in a bonding. So I think, you know, those kind of priority projects you guys are knocking off in the correct order.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and then, again, we've already talked about this, but we pretty much at the last meeting or the last discussion of this, we pretty much, other than that, it was a roads thing. And now we have a new item that has come since that discussion. So we're still doing what we originally prioritized, was the roads plus the shed. So I'm in agreement that,
I just would add the road to getting the majority of the funding.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so no further discussion then. Okay.
Quick, I think just to follow up maybe, I think what, as Matt asked the question, nothing surfaced of something pressing to do. But I think that, you know, we have to keep that in mind too, that if there is something that we're not thinking of, that's, I don't want to, with the motion to lock us into this and there's something that we're not looking at right now. And that's why I lean more towards direction of this, which I think would carry the same as a motion. This is the route we want to go, and to see where we are. You know, we do have another month and plus of what discussion is going to be on the budget and whatnot, and things may surface along the line. So I you know, to look at that, this would be the route to go. It's fine, just, you know, if something surfaces that, you know, I don't want to be brought back on the 10th of November that, but we said we were going to do this, so we can't do that. You know, this process is to put the things together and that they work to, you know, at the end that you have a document put together of what we're going to do. So, you know, we may agree at one point in time of what of doing something, but we also may down the road come across that, well, this might be more important to do than what we said 2 weeks ago on something, you know. So we have to be somewhat flexible on as we go through this thing, because this is a month and a half, 2-month project of what we're starting on. And I'm just saying from our point starting on, it's been started on for, you know, months already of putting this preliminary budget together. So, you know, finally to get put numbers to everything and see where we stand. You know, the guess is that the preliminary the budget is generally there's not a whole lot of changes as we go through it because it's pretty much cut bare boned already. So that's the concern I have with locking in on the that there is room for change if need to be to change. That's the current concern I have. Because I'm all in favor of doing the building and putting it with the street project, but if something is way out of line, I think that goes back to Jay. What if that has gone up from on the building too? You know, is that offset to build that building to get it indoors? I agree, because we should have done it before. So it's just, you know, not to totally lock us in early in the game like this.
Just a comment, I don't feel that this is locking us in. I think this is pointing us in that direction. And that's the intent of the motion, is my understanding, is to go after pricing for a city garage shed, and we'll make the decision once we get the pricing back. And if things come up between now and then, I mean, we can absolutely talk about it. This in no means is dedicating those funds to those projects at this point in time. It's just gathering the information we need to make the decision, right?
Your Honor?
Ditto.
What were you gonna say?
I was going to say the same thing.
Thank you. Well, then, so, then the motion still fits, and no further discussion. We'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passed. 8-0. That's pretty. 7, yeah, that's right, Patrick's not here, sorry. And that was the only item on the agenda tonight, so I guess the next item on the agenda is to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.